Listen, let me ask you something that might sound simple at first, but if you really pause and think about it, it hits deeper than we realize. What if the way you handle money, yes, the simple coins, notes, and choices you make every day has the power to reveal what kind of heart you truly carry? What if something as ordinary as giving, saving, spending, or sharing is actually a window into your soul, a mirror that reflects your character, and a spotlight that shows what you value most? And what if Jesus, who understood that our hearts are often tied to our treasures, gave us stories, brilliant, unforgettable stories that help us see money not as a measure of success but as a tool for spiritual growth? Today, we're going to step inside those stories. Like actually walk into them. Picture colorful animation, warm light, joyful music, scenes coming alive as Jesus teaches crowds, disciples leaning in, children watching from behind rocks, birds fluttering overhead, and all of us sitting right there in the moment, listening. Because the 4 parables we're about to explore aren't just teachings. They're keys. They unlock something powerful about generosity, trust, attitude, and the way God sees everything we give, even the things no one else notices. So let's step into the first parable, one of the most emotional, surprising, and beautifully humbling moments in the Bible. It takes place in the temple courtyard, surrounded by crowds, priests, offerings, and the kind of dramatic contrast that only Jesus could highlight with a single sentence. Imagine this scene in animation. Warm golden sunlight pours through tall stone archways. People walk around, placing their offerings with pride, the kind of showy movements you can't miss. And there sits Jesus, calm, observing, watching the heart behind every action. And right when everyone is focused on the wealthy giving large amounts with exaggerated gestures, in walks someone no one else would have paid attention to. A tiny elderly widow, frail but glowing with quiet dignity, holding just 2 small coins in her hand. They're barely worth anything. They don't shine like the coins others give. They don't make a loud clanging noise when dropped in. They're simple. Almost invisible. But then something incredible happens. She walks to the offering box, pauses for a moment, whispers something so soft not even the birds can hear, and she drops both coins in. The sound is tiny, a little tap, but that sound echoes through eternity. Because at that moment Jesus smiles and tells his disciples, "She gave more than all of them." Wait, how? How could 2 tiny coins be more valuable than huge offerings? Jesus explains it in a way that flips the entire scene upside down. They gave out of their surplus. She gave out of her poverty, everything she had. So suddenly the animation shifts, light forms around the widow, her coins glow as they fall, and we, the viewers, understand the message. It's not about the amount. It's about the heart. It's about trust. It's about whether we give to be seen or whether we give because we love God. And in that moment, Jesus reveals something powerful. Heaven sees generosity differently. Heaven counts sacrifice, not the size of the gift. And that's the first secret Jesus teaches about money. It's spiritual, not material. It's not about what's in your wallet. It's about what's in your heart. Now while that widow quietly walks away, her hands empty, her heart full, Jesus invites us into the next parable. But before he explains it, imagine a transition in animation. A golden light rotates around the scene, the temple fades out, and now we're standing in a large courtyard with a wealthy master preparing for a long journey. Birds scatter into the sky as he calls 3 servants. He looks at each one carefully, as if he already knows what they're capable of, and then he places something in each of their hands. To one, he gives 5 bags of gold. To another, he gives 2. And to the last, he gives 1. But here's the twist: he doesn't tell them what to do with it. He doesn't give instructions. He simply trusts them. And that's where the story becomes like a test of their hearts. Picture the first servant smiling with determination, the sun glowing behind him as he runs into town to invest the gold. He starts small, working, trading, taking risks, believing that the master's gift is meant to increase. And it does. The animation can show gold multiplying like blooming flowers. The second servant does the same, less gold, but same effort, same faith, same excitement. But the third servant, fear creeps around him like a dark shadow. The animation shows swirling gray smoke around his head, doubts whispering, what if you lose it? What if the master gets angry? Better hide it. Better bury it. Better keep everything safe. So he digs a hole, lowers the gold into the ground, and walks away thinking he did the responsible thing. Fast forward through time, the master returns. There's excitement in the air. Birds fly overhead. Servants gather around him. The first servant comes running smiling, joyful, grateful and hands him 10 bags of gold. The master beams with pride and says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." It's one of the most beautiful compliments in Scripture. The second servant steps forward 4 bags now and receives the same praise. But then the air grows still. The third servant steps forward with a nervous expression. He holds the single bag, dusty and unchanged. And he speaks words that show his entire mindset, "I was afraid." Suddenly the animation shows fear as chains around his hands. Because fear, not lack of money, is what kept him from growing the master's treasure. The master sighs, disappointed, not because he earned little, but because he didn't even try. He didn't trust. He didn't move. He didn't use what he was given. And that's the second key Jesus reveals about money. God doesn't compare us based on amounts. God looks at whether we use the opportunities, skills, resources, and blessings He puts in our hands. Some people are given more. Some are given less. But each one is responsible not for the size of the gift but for the size of their faithfulness. Now imagine the scene dissolving again. Sunlight fades, clouds stretch across the sky, and we enter another parable. This time, the tone shifts slightly. The environment becomes warm, golden, filled with the colors of ripe harvest fields. Farmers gather crops, storing grain in huge baskets. And in the middle of the busy village is a man, wealthy, successful, smiling with satisfaction as he looks over the biggest harvest of his life. His barns overflow. His storage baskets burst. His workers can barely carry all the wheat he owns. And instead of gratitude, instead of generosity, he says something surprising. He looks at everything he has and thinks, "What should I do? I know. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. More storage. More collecting. More keeping for himself." So in animation, you see huge barns rising like monuments, his greed reflected in their towering shadows. Then night falls. Crickets chirp. The man sits alone counting his wealth like it's the measure of his life. And then comes a voice, calm but firm, saying, "You fool! Tonight your soul will be required of you. Then who will own what you collected?" Suddenly everything fades, the barns shrink, the gold dims, the harvest lifts away like dust. And Jesus explains to the crowd and to us what it means. Life isn't measured by how much you store up. Life isn't about bigger barns or fuller accounts or more things. The real treasure is being rich toward God. The parable ends with soft music, warm golden light returning, reminding us that the third key about money is this: money is temporary. Life is short. Eternity is long. And what we build in our hearts matters far more than what we build in our barns. And now the animation gently transitions again, this time bringing us to a road dusty, winding, stretching between Jerusalem and Jericho. Travelers walk with sandals kicking up clouds of dust. The sun beats down on rocky cliffs. And Jesus begins telling the story of generosity beyond boundaries. A Jewish man is walking the road when trouble suddenly strikes. Robbers appear, not shown violently, but as swirling dark shadows symbolizing danger. They leave the man wounded on the ground. And now the test begins. A priest walks by, holy robes flowing, important expression on his face. He sees the man, but passes by. A Levite comes next, the same thing. Maybe they had reasons, maybe excuses, maybe fear. But they walk around him, ignoring his need. Then comes someone unexpected, a Samaritan. Someone society disliked. Someone no one thought would be the hero. But he stops. His footsteps slow, dust settles around him, he kneels beside the injured man. He pours wine and oil illustrated as glowing healing light onto his wounds. He lifts him onto his donkey, carries him to an inn, and pays for his care with coins that glimmer in the animation like warm stars. And the lesson Jesus gives is simple but world-changing. True generosity crosses boundaries. It crosses differences. It steps beyond convenience. Money becomes meaningful when it heals, helps, lifts, serves, and reflects the heart of God. These four parables together form a picture like puzzle pieces fitting into place. A widow who gives from her heart. Servants who grow what they're given. A rich fool who forgets eternity. And a Samaritan who uses his resources to show mercy. Each story teaches something different, but all reveal the bigger message: money itself isn't evil. But your heart determines whether money becomes a blessing or a trap. Whether it becomes a tool or a master. Whether it brings you closer to God or takes you further away. And the truth is, every day we make choices with our money, tiny choices, quiet choices, unseen choices that reveal the story of our hearts just as powerfully as the characters in these parables. And as we continue this journey, these animations will help us walk deeper into their meaning, because the second half of this story is where everything comes together, where the lessons turn into personal reflection, where we discover what Jesus is really inviting us to do with what we have, and how these ancient stories speak directly into our modern lives. So take a breath. We've stepped into the parables. Now let's step into the message they want to plant inside our hearts. Now that we've stepped inside each of these powerful parables, let's walk even deeper into the heart of what Jesus was showing us. Because the meaning doesn't end with the story. In fact, the true message begins right after the story finishes, right after the characters fade and the crowd grows silent, right where Jesus lets the lesson sit in our hearts like a seed waiting to grow. So imagine the animation slowly transitioning into a quiet moment. The crowds that once surrounded Jesus have drifted away. The dusty air settles. A gentle breeze moves through the olive trees. And Jesus looks at his disciples not with the intensity of a warning, but with the tenderness of a father teaching his children. And in that moment, his eyes seem to ask the same question he's asking all of us: what will you do with what I've given you? As the screen softens into warm golden light, imagine Jesus gently lifting a small coin between his fingers, letting the sunlight shimmer through it. He turns it, examines it, and says something the disciples will remember for the rest of their lives: where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. It's such a simple sentence, but it lands like truth spoken directly into the soul. Because Jesus knew something we try to ignore: your money follows your heart. Your spending reveals your values. Your giving reveals your love. Your priorities reveal your purpose. And the parables are not about money itself, they're about the condition of the heart behind the money. So let's enter back into each story not as spectators this time, but as participants, as people holding the same choices in our own hands. Picture the widow again. The animation now brings her close to the viewer. We see the wrinkles on her hands, the simplicity of her clothing, the sparkle of courage in her tired eyes. She stands in front of the offering box. But this time, instead of watching her give, we imagine ourselves standing right beside her, looking at our own hands. Are they clenched tightly around what we own? Or are they open, trusting, willing to give even when it's hard? Because the widow teaches us something uncomfortable and beautiful: God sees sacrifice, not leftovers. God notices the painful gift, the quiet gift, the hidden gift, the gift no one else celebrates. Heaven applauds the offering that costs something. And maybe you've felt like your gift is too small, too insignificant, too unimportant compared to others. But Jesus flips that thought upside down. In heaven's economy, the smallest gift given with the biggest heart becomes greater than the largest gift given with the smallest intention. In animation, imagine her 2 little coins falling in slow motion, glowing brighter and brighter until they light up the entire temple. Because in God's eyes, faith shines brighter than money. Now let's return to the 3 servants and their talents. Instead of seeing them as characters in a story, imagine them as mirrors of our own lives. We all have gifts. We all have opportunities. We all have skills, time, influence, relationships, creativity, and experiences we can invest. Some people were born with more. Some with less. But the lesson Jesus gives does not say, be like the servant with 5 talents. The lesson says, use what you have. If you have a lot, use a lot. If you have a little, use a little. But whatever you do, don't bury it. Don't hide it. Don't shrink back out of fear. Don't convince yourself that you're not enough, that what you have doesn't matter, that your contribution is too small. In animation, imagine the buried talent underground where darkness surrounds it, but suddenly a beam of light pierces the soil and shows how much potential was wasted simply because the servant didn't try. Jesus calls that servant wicked and lazy, not because he failed, but because he didn't even take the first step. And maybe that's what Jesus is trying to tell us today. Start with what you have. Invest your time. Use your creativity. Share your gifts. Give generously. Try boldly. Trust completely. Because when we use what God has placed in our hands, growth happens. Fruit happens. Multiplication happens. And in the end, the Master's words echo through eternity, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Imagine hearing those words someday. Imagine the joy. Imagine the reward. Imagine the celebration. That is why the second parable matters so deeply. It's not about gaining more, it's about becoming more. Now the animation shifts again, drawing us into the quiet fields of the rich fool. But this time, we're not watching him build barns, we're watching ourselves. Every dream we have. Every plan. Every goal. Every wish for the future. All of it plays out like moving pictures across the sky. And Jesus gently invites us to ask a question we rarely think about: what am I storing up? What am I chasing? What am I building? Are we building barns of achievement? Barns of possessions? Barns of comfort? Barns of security? Barns of pride? The rich fool didn't fail because he was rich. He failed because he believed the lie that life is about collecting instead of contributing. He believed that his soul could be satisfied with stuff. But no matter how much he collected, he couldn't secure another heartbeat. And this is where the message becomes deeply personal, deeply challenging, deeply transformative. Because Jesus isn't saying money is evil. He's saying money makes a terrible master. Jesus isn't saying don't save. He's saying don't worship what you save. Jesus isn't saying don't plan for the future. He's saying don't build your life around something you can't take with you. And as the animation shows the barns fading into dust, we're reminded of a truth that cuts through the noise of this world: the only treasure we get to keep is the treasure we send ahead to heaven, treasure measured in faith, sacrifice, generosity, love, compassion, obedience, and kindness. And now we arrive at the final parable, not the last one Jesus ever told, but the one that ties the whole message together. The Good Samaritan. Because generosity isn't only measured in coins, it's measured in compassion. It's measured in how willing we are to stop for someone who needs us. And this time, imagine the animation showing the road from a bird's eye view. There are countless people traveling. Some are busy, some distracted, some in a hurry, some too focused on their own lives to notice others. But that one Samaritan chooses differently. He doesn't step over the problem. He steps into the story. He chooses mercy over convenience. He chooses love over boundaries. He chooses compassion over comfort. And Jesus asks us to do the same. When someone is hurting, will we stop? When someone is struggling, will we help? When someone is lonely, will we notice? When someone is broken, will we care? The Samaritan used money, but not for himself. He used it to heal, to lift, to restore. And Jesus shows us that the most meaningful use of money is not storing it, but sowing it into the lives of others. In the animation, imagine the Samaritan's coins turning into seeds that grow into trees of healing around the inn. Because generosity always multiplies into something bigger than the act itself. Now imagine all 4 parables merging together. The widow's courage. The servant's responsibility. The rich fool's warning. The Samaritan's compassion. The animation blends their scenes into one glowing masterpiece, a lantern of golden light floating upward into a starry night sky. And Jesus is standing in front of it, looking at us with gentle eyes that hold both truth and love. He isn't giving rules. He's giving wisdom. He isn't demanding money. He's shaping hearts. And through this animation, through these stories, he invites each of us into a deeper journey where our resources become tools of grace instead of symbols of greed. Where our hands become open instead of clenched. Where our giving becomes joyful instead of reluctant. Where our purpose becomes eternal instead of temporary. So let's imagine Jesus speaking to us right now, in a voice filled with warmth and clarity. You have something in your hands, he says. Something I entrusted to you. Something no one else has. Use it well. Use it with love. Use it with faith. Use it with courage. Use it for my glory. And suddenly everything becomes personal. Because these parables aren't about other people, they're about us. They're about the moments no one sees when we choose generosity. They're about the decisions we make when fear tries to bury our talents. They're about the choices we make between building barns or building God's kingdom. They're about whether we stop for the wounded or walk past them. And in those choices, we reveal our heart. Now imagine the animation transitioning into a modern world scene: children walking to school, families sharing food, people helping neighbors, a hand lifting someone who has fallen, a friend sharing with another, someone giving quietly without wanting to be noticed. These simple everyday moments illustrate how the parables live on today. Because God still sees the widow who gives quietly. God still rewards the servant who invests faithfully. God still warns the heart that trusts in riches. God still honors the Samaritan who stops to help. These stories are not ancient, they are alive. They are here. They are happening through us, around us, inside us. And as the final scene begins to form, the animation grows brighter, warmer, more joyful. We see Jesus walking along a glowing path, surrounded by people who have lived out these lessons. There are widows, servants, Samaritans, farmers, disciples, children, families, all shining with the beauty of generosity and faithfulness. And Jesus turns toward the viewer, toward you, with a smile full of welcome and encouragement. Walk with me, he says. Live out these stories. Let your heart shine through how you give, how you love, how you help, how you trust. And his voice becomes the guiding message of the entire story, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The animation closes with one final image: four glowing symbols floating together, a pair of tiny coins, a handful of talents, a fading barn, and a Samaritan's hand extended in kindness. These four images slowly rise like lanterns into the sky, merging into a single radiant light that illuminates everything below. And that light represents the heart of Jesus. The heart we are called to reflect. The heart that transforms money into ministry, riches into responsibility, coins into compassion, wealth into worship. And as the final moment plays out, imagine a beautiful orchestral swell of music as the narrator's voice, your voice, speaks directly to the viewers one last time. These parables aren't just stories. They're invitations. Invitations to live generously. To give bravely. To trust deeply. To love boldly. To use everything God has given us not to build bigger barns, but to build a bigger heart. And if we choose that path, if we choose to live out these truths, then our lives become part of the greatest story ever told. A story where generosity echoes into eternity. A story where even the smallest gift makes a difference. A story where God smiles at the faithfulness of his children. Then, with a warm closing tone, the animation gently fades to soft golden light, leaving viewers inspired, encouraged, and ready to live out the lessons of Jesus in their own lives.